This is KGW News at noon.
So here we are. The Supreme Court, including the president's appointees, have declared that he is not above the law.
The Supreme Court rules in two cases about the power of Congress and the legal immunity of the president. Thank you for joining us. I'm Brenda Braxton. Today's ruling means the president may have to turn over some of his financial and tax records. He reacted to the rulings in a tweet, calling them unfair and a political prosecution. NBC's Alice Barr is in Washington with the late-breaking details.
In a pivotal decision today, the Supreme Court ruling 7-2 that President Trump is not immune to the grand jury process. This stems from the case of a New York prosecutor seeking the president's financial records for an investigation into payments made to two women who claim they had affairs with him, which the president denies. But the records won't automatically be released. The case now goes back down to the trial court, where the president's legal team has to come up with a reason to block releasing the records that would apply to anyone else. They can't just say he's immune because he's president. The justices also sent a separate case back down to the lower courts, this one regarding subpoenas from 3 House committees for several years' worth of President Trump's business records from his accounting firm and 2 banks. This one is partly a response to claims by the president's former lawyer and fixer, Michael Cohen, who said his old boss would inflate or deflate his assets to serve his own purposes. House Democrats also want to know whether the president had any financial dealings with Russia before taking office. That's something President Trump has frequently denied. The decisions today mean that these cases will almost certainly not be decided before the election, because now they'll be going down to the lower courts and from there can be appealed again. In Washington, Alice Barr, NBC News.
The Supreme Court has faced questions before about a president's power to resist a subpoena. Presidents Nixon and Clinton both lost in each of those unanimous rulings. Now to the very latest on the coronavirus. Oregon reported 217 new cases yesterday, along with 4 new deaths. You can see from this chart the daily number of new infections has increased in recent weeks. Officials predict Oregon could see as many as 900 new cases per day if this trend continues. So far, there have been almost 11,000 infections statewide and 224 deaths. The recent spike in cases will stop the Portland area from moving forward with reopening. Multnomah, Washington, and Clackamas counties are staying in Phase 1 for now. On Twitter, Multnomah County Chair Deborah Kafori said the county didn't want to race into Phase 2. Instead, it needs to, quote, normalize wearing face coverings, distance, and hygiene to show that we can rely on each other to take steps that keep everyone as safe as possible until there's a vaccine. Clackamas and Washington counties will also delay moving into Phase 2 since Governor Brown grouped the 3 counties together when it comes to making these kinds of decisions. 80 of yesterday's new cases are in the Tri-County area. We're also seeing a major spike of cases in eastern Oregon. Almost half of Umatilla County's 800 infections have been confirmed in the last 8 days. 115 of those are linked to the Lamb Weston potato processing plant in Hermiston. The plant shut down and paid employees to stay home after testing in June. However, Umatilla County commissioners say most agricultural workers can't afford to stay home. Well, next week, the CDC will release new guidelines for schools to reopen. The president has threatened to withhold federal funding for schools that don't. Right now, this is what the CDC is saying about reopening. And remember, these guidelines are voluntary. Kids' desks must be 6 feet apart, and most cafeterias and playgrounds would be closed. Kids should also be encouraged to wear face coverings. But President Trump called those measures tough and expensive, and now the CDC is drawing up a new plan. Here's what the president said yesterday.
Learning by computer is not as good as learning in the classroom. Our schools, we want them open in the fall.
The president insists any opposition to reopening is politically motivated. As for withholding that federal money, most school budgets are funded by state and city dollars. Now to the new unemployment numbers. The Department of Labor released its weekly report on new unemployment claims this morning. It shows more than 1.3 million Americans filed for benefits last week. That is down slightly from the week before, when we saw 1.4 million claims. These numbers have been dropping for 14 weeks in a row. However, more than 49 million Americans have filed for unemployment benefits since March. Portland's police union issued a vote of no confidence in the city council for the way it's handling downtown demonstrations. We're also hearing from someone who's been in the middle of these late night protests at least a dozen times. He tells our Mike Benner he doesn't condone the violence, but says the discomfort it causes is the point.
Some will say what's happening in downtown Portland on a nightly basis is lawlessness, but others will tell you what you see here is a collective exhale.
As a nation, it's a movement, and it's one that every city, every precinct, everywhere throughout in the entire U.S. Is involved in.
Simab Husseini's comments come just hours after Deputy Chief Chris Davis of the Portland Police Bureau called the protests the worst he's ever seen.
We've never seen this intensity of violent, focused criminal activity over this long of a period of time, at least in the time that I have been here.
Davis says upwards of 100 people, both officers and demonstrators, have been hurt over the course of the last month. Countless buildings have been vandalized. Daryl Turner of the Portland Police Association revealed a vote of no confidence in city leaders.
I have no confidence that the city will stop the rioting and the looting and protect the safety and livelihood of Portlanders.
Turner understands law enforcement is under the microscope. He's proposing an 8-point plan to improve the Portland Police Bureau. Among the ideas, more training on crisis intervention and de-escalation, a return to community policing, and body cameras.
I've been a strong advocate for body cameras. I believe that it will build more trust in the community. It's an accountability measure that we need and we must have.
Body-worn cameras have no proven impact on police misconduct.
Outside of that, Husseini calls the Portland Police Association's no confidence vote in city leaders gaslighting and smoke and mirrors.
And it's basically saying, we will be more concerned about these broken windows and these spray-painted walls over actually talking about reforms and true accountability.
Husseini says that is what the nightly protests are all about, adding that if they're making people uncomfortable, the whole thing is working.
We want to work with the city. We want to see transformative change. We want to see actual reform take place.
KGW has made multiple attempts to reach the mayor and city commissioners to get their take on what's going on. So far, no response. We'll, of course, keep trying. I'm Mike Benner for KGW News.
We also want to let you know that at 1 o'clock this afternoon, Portland's police chief will hold another press conference. Chief Chuck Lavelle and one of his officers will share their perspective on the protests and answer some questions. You can watch the live stream on KGW.com.